Good morning, guys. So it's 6 a.m. I have coffee brewing once again. I am going to not set anything definite that I'm going to read. I think I will finish the section of the volume of Kierkegaard that I was on and then just set it aside. It was not a good book for a readathon. And then I will pick up something simpler, and I also had a bit of a heart-to-heart with myself last night and realized that the majority of the books that I put on that pile of possibilities last week were not really good fodder for a readathon. It's just, I think it's a bit harder to find non-fiction that's good for a readathon than fiction, unless it's a memoir. Just because even though I like nonfiction, it does tend to go a bit slower than fiction. It tends to be more difficult to binge read and still feel like I'm really getting everything I should be out of it. So I have a new sort of set of books that I picked out that I think it might be good, and a couple of them are still books that were on that TBR. But anyway, and again, it wasn't a TBR; it was a pile of possibilities. So yeah. But anyway, I'll talk to you later. Alright, it's now 10 a.m., just after 10 a.m., and I'm done. I'm going to stop reading for the morning. I've now read 135 pages this morning, and after I film this, I'm going to get ready to head to the rink, so you guys should be seeing more clips of my skating. What I read about 30 pages more of reading Lolita in Tehran, and she is talking now about her. The first section of the book is called Nabokov, so she talks about Vladimir Nabokov and that sort of private course that she gave with the three young women, or not three young women, but several young women. Now in the second section, which is called Gatsby, she's talking about. She sort of moves backward in time to when she was still an academic at the University of Tehran, and was working there and teaching right after the Islamic Revolution had just occurred. And it was a very tumultuous time. A lot of professors were getting expelled for not being, ideologically conformist. There was a lot of shootings and a lot of infighting between different factions. There were leftist secular groups. There were Islamist groups jockeying for power, and then there was the Ayatollah in command of everything. And yeah, I'm still really, really enjoying it. I do kind of prefer the parts where she talks about books, but just learning about Iran just after the revolution is interesting on its own. So I'm still liking that. I then started, since I set aside the Kierkegaard, I was still sort of hungering for some philosophy. I think that's sort of why I picked up the Kierkegaard. So I went for this. This is Introducing Foucault by Chris Horrocks and Zoran Jevitic. And this is actually a graphic novel style book looking at Foucault's life, but more his thought. It gives you the broad strokes of Foucault's life. It's mostly about his thought and writing, and also his influences. It talks about briefly about Heidegger, Hegel, Nietzsche. It's talking about Nietzsche right now, which is nice for me. A lot of it's very basic, which is the point. I mean, in a short graphic novel like this, you would expect it to be very basic. But I haven't read it. I've read one essay by Foucault. I read it in college in a class on fascism, and I actually remember finding it pretty interesting, but I don't remember much from it. But other than that, I haven't read any full books by Foucault, and I think he might be an interesting philosopher for me to explore, and reading this has just confirmed that suspicion for me, because a lot of his work was actually on psychology, particularly psychiatry, and the history of how we have conceived of madness. He sort of found, or he argues that madness is not a sort of objective category that's always been thought of the same way. The idea of what madness is has changed throughout history. One of his major books was about how in the Middle Ages, madness wasn't necessarily an external entity that afflicted someone. Like we think of it today almost like we think of pathogens, like an illness, but in the Middle Ages it was more a sort of spiritual struggle of the person that was often expressed through art. And he cites Hieronymus Bosch, the painter, as a particular example. But then as the Enlightenment progressed, we started to think of madness more as, again, an affliction, something external to us, something abnormal. And, you know, there was a period where people who were mad were put in asylums and just sort of shoved away from normal society and considered just aberrant and needed to just be locked away forever. And then we eventually came to the 20th century where Freud sort of initiated the idea of, well, we can talk to people who are mentally ill and help them talk through their mental illness and hopefully help them to, you know, function well with it. And that all sounds super interesting to me. I mean, I study psychology. I don't study clinical psychology, so it's perhaps not directly relevant to my research per se, but it is just interesting in its own right. And yeah, so I am 63 pages into it. It's only 170 pages long, and it goes by really quickly. You know, there's not that much text on every page, and most of it is like, you know, dialogue boxes or something. I will say about this graphic novel, I don't think the artwork or the writing itself is particularly virtuosic, but I'm learning a lot and I'm liking it, so that's cool. I think I might try to finish this today, but if not, I'll finish it tomorrow definitely, because again, it goes by quickly. And then the last thing that I finally started was an essay in The Proper Study of Mankind by Isaiah Berlin. This essay is called The Concept of Scientific History. And I chose that essay to read. It's about 50 pages long, so I'll read like 10 pages per day. But I chose that essay because I thought it was going to be about the history of science. But what it's actually about is also very interesting, just not quite what I thought it was. What it is about is this question of, is history a science? Is history like empirical in the way that biology and physics are? Can you really call it a field that puts forth hypotheses, tests them with data, and either supports the hypothesis or doesn't? And so he's grappling with that question, and that's still super interesting to me. And I'm really finding it pretty interesting so far. Isaiah Berlin is not a quick read. He's a good writer, but he is kind of dry. So yeah, I'll read like 10 pages of the essay per day. It's 50 pages long, so I'll get it done by the end of this week. And who knows, maybe I'll get inspired and finish it before then. But anyway, I was curious from all of you guys, because I know a lot of people who watch this channel, a lot of my fellow booktubers are interested in history. Do you think of history as a science, as like an empirical science, or is it something more in line with the study of literature or art, or is it sort of something all on its own? What do you guys think about that? I'm curious. Yeah, so anyway, I had a very good reading morning. What I did this morning, which I do occasionally, is I turned my phone on airplane mode, so no notifications or anything like that. My laptop was in this room, and I was reading over in my bedroom, so no laptop nearby. I turned on my, so I was disconnected from the cyberspace, and I set a timer for 3 hours, and I just said I'm gonna read for these 3 hours and do nothing else, other than when I went and grabbed a cup of coffee, but that doesn't really count. And I just did that, and I occasionally do that on the weekends. I will just set a timer for either 2 hours or 3 hours, and just turn off all electronics, and just read. Yeah, I don't always read, obviously, the same book for that whole time, but I just read. Do you guys ever do that, and do you enjoy it? Because I mean, for me, it's become a really nice sort of weekly ritual of just disconnecting the electronics, going offline, and just focusing on what I'm reading. I find it very rejuvenating. And it is a lot of fun to come back from that and see whether I do have any notifications. So yeah, do you guys do that? Yeah, I guess I have 2 questions for you. Do you think history is a science? Do you have, sort of reading sprints where you read for 2 or 3 hours without electronics on? But anyway, I am going to head to the rink, or we'll get ready to head to the rink. I'm not ready to go yet, but hopefully you guys will see some skating videos, and I'll talk to you later.
Fastest we've ever done.
You're doing great. There was a camera there. Come on.
Like started and then it's, wait, what?
Right? Okay, go somewhere. Honey, you were just cruising around this place.
Hey guys, so I may be dressed exactly the same as I was before, but I actually did go skating. It was, as you are gonna see in the clip I'm gonna include, it was incredibly crowded, which is typical over a vacation like this. So I didn't do much, which isn't the end of the world, but is slightly frustrating. But before I get back to reading, I am going to bake some banana bread for a Friendsgiving tomorrow that I'll be going to. I'm hoping I can find a recipe that I cooked before that was super good, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to. I'll just find something simple on the internet. I'm not like a big baker or anything like that. And then I'm going to bake some sweet potatoes, because I'm also going to be making a sweet potato casserole for the Friendsgiving, but for today I'll just bake the sweet potatoes, and then they'll be ready for me to put them into the casserole tomorrow, and that'll be really simple. But I thought I would sort of vlog through all that, just to get a little bit of a change from all the reading stuff, so here we go. Alright, I lied. I'm not going to be making banana bread today, because I forgot to defrost the bananas. So I think I'm just going to do all my baking tomorrow, except for the sweet potatoes, which I'll just stick in the oven. That won't be terribly interesting for you guys to see. But yeah, so no kitchen today, but tomorrow I promise. So anyways, that just means I'll go ahead and get back to reading. I will read some more of Reading Lolita in Tehran, and some more about Foucault. So it's now about 4:30, and I've read all of my 200 pages for the day. So yeah, I've gotten 25 more pages read of reading Lolita in Tehran. One thought that I had while reading this is because a lot of it, but not all of it, is book talk about, she's progressed from talking about Nabokov to talking about F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a great book for me to read to get me back into reading fiction after reading a lot of nonfiction during Nonfiction November. It occurred to me earlier, a couple months ago, that I have only read like 5 novels this year. I've read a bunch of like epic poems and plays and things like that, which I would class as sort of fiction. They're made up stories at least. But I've only read like 5 or 6 novels. And originally one of my sort of informal goals for the fall season was to remedy that and read more novels at the end of the year, and I have not been able to do that. But I think December will be a fiction-heavy month for me, and this is a great way to just get inspired for that. But yeah, it's a really interesting memoir. I mean, Nafisi is still talking about her time as a professor during the early days after the Islamic Revolution, and there's just she's going into so many nuanced discussions about politics and the revolution and the different ideologies that were at play. She has a lot of talks with this one particular student of hers who often would come to her office to just talk to her, and he was a devout Muslim. Almost, I would say, it seems like a fundamentalist Muslim himself. And he would come to her office and they would have these talks, and she was much more secular, and they would rarely agree on anything, but they would have these really heated but seemingly respectful debates. And she just talks about the sort of back and forth between them with so much nuance. And I guess I don't always expect that from a memoir, so that's great. The students in her class right now are doing something really interesting. One of the more religious students raised an issue with The Great Gatsby, saying that Gatsby is immoral and against the values of Islam. And Nafisi sort of said, well, the point of a character in a novel isn't to, emulate how the character behaves, so you shouldn't do that. But he was adamant. So what she did was she set up a trial in her own class. The class sort of has a jury, and or students in the class have the jury, and one student was assigned as the judge, one was I think Azar Nafisi herself was the defendant, so she represents the novel. And then the student who raised his concern is the prosecutor. And that just seems like a really interesting way of talking about sort of censorship and the way that this regime is trying to force religion to be completely subservient, or literature to be completely subservient to the state. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call right now, but my phone doesn't recognize the number, so I'm not going to pick it up. So I'm just going to let it ring. So, I don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, I have also read about 40 more pages of this graphic novel about Foucault. I'm definitely not quite understanding everything. The captions are all so small and the ideas are so complicated that I don't always feel like it's enough space within which to explain the ideas well. So I'm getting a very surface level, vague idea of what Foucault, the main threads of Foucault's thought were. And so I think that this is a good introduction, but it's a very, very bare bones introduction. I will think about whether or not I'm gonna order some books by Foucault after finishing this, because I definitely find his thought interesting. I mean, to the extent that I can understand it so far, he talks a lot about the history of ideas. He talks about discourse and like the nature of discourse, how we come to understandings of things. He talks about art, visual art, painting, and literature, of course, and language and how we use language. So yeah, he seems to deal with a lot of issues that I'm interested in. But anyway, I don't know quite. I don't know what to say other than that, just because I'm so new to the ideas and the way I'm being introduced to them is so sort of surface level that I don't feel like I can say much that's horribly substantive. So anyway, but I am liking it. I'm more than halfway through it. We'll see if I finish it today. I'm actually going to stop reading for a while because I want to watch Persona, the Ingmar Bergman film, finally, which I thought I would do yesterday, but I didn't. But I think I will do it today because I have a bit more energy and I'm in the mood for a film. So I'll let you guys know what I think. So I just finished watching Persona. Very interesting. I don't know what to make of it. I I went to the Wikipedia page for it and read only a little bit of it, but I felt validated when I read that it is seen as a sort of enigmatic film because I'm not really quite sure what to make of it. I guess I wrote down some thoughts on it, but I don't know how anything really connects together. I'm not even quite sure what the film is really about, I guess. But something... So, if anyone doesn't know the story of Persona, it's about this famous actress who is played by B.B. Anderson, and this actress, whose name is Elizabeth, has stopped talking, basically. Stopped saying any words, essentially. And she's in a hospital, and this nurse, who is played by an actress whose name I've forgotten, I think Liv Ullmann, I think might be her name. This nurse is assigned to basically take care of her. Yeah, Liv Ullmann plays the nurse. The nurse's name is Alma. And this nurse is assigned to take care of her, and they are sent to this sort of vacation home by the ocean, by the coast, for ostensibly for Alma to sort of take care of Elizabeth and try and get her to talk. And Alma basically spends most of their time up there talking to Elizabeth and revealing all these very personal things about her, feeling like she's developing this rapport with Elizabeth. And it did cross my mind at one point that it seems almost as though the relationship between Elizabeth and Alma is like the relationship between a therapist and a patient in psychoanalysis. Somehow I always end up talking about psychoanalysis on my channel, even though I don't believe in psychoanalysis. But I feel like there is something to be said about this. I mean, when you think about it, in psychoanalysis, the psychoanalyst is sitting there very quietly taking notes on what the patient is saying. And in this film, we have this one woman who is completely silent, and this one woman who essentially Liv Ullmann's character just talks and talks and talks and talks. It's a very obvious contrast with Elizabeth trying to be completely silent, and we're led to believe that Elizabeth is silent because somehow she feels like whenever she talks, she inevitably ends up putting up some sort of a facade or acting, which I guess is somehow related to the fact that she is actually an actress. And so there's her who can't talk because she feels like it's fake, and then there's Alma who can't stop talking, but also paradoxically through all that talking actually does reveal so much about herself to Elizabeth. And I guess over the course of the film, I guess I got the sense that Elizabeth wanted to be this sort of blank canvas, or tabula rasa, I guess, that was at least honest, even though clearly in that state she can't really do much of anything. But I guess being like that, I mean, sort of over the course of the film, the distinction between Alma and Elizabeth becomes kind of blurred. There's this scene where, like, their faces are, half of one face, half the other face, but then all of a sudden they look like one face. And I guess what Elizabeth seems to, what happens with Elizabeth is that she wants to be a blank canvas, but, you know, a canvas, to draw out the metaphor, is for painting. So once someone like Alma comes along, then she starts sort of reading herself into Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's ostensible husband ostensibly visits. It's unclear whether this incident actually happens to me, but Elizabeth's husband visits and takes Alma to be Elizabeth. But on the other hand, based on what Alma has said about her own relationship with her husband, the way that she interacts with Elizabeth's supposed husband seems very much the way that we could see Alma interacting with her own supposed husband. So, I don't know, it's interesting. I don't know, it's like Mirror by the Tarkovsky's film Mirror, which is just so, when I watched that for the first time, I was also baffled, but the second time I watched it, I got so much more out of it, and I think that this is a film where a similar thing will happen, where I will rewatch it at some point and hopefully get a bit more out of it. I did read on that Wikipedia page that, like, it's like one of the most analyzed films ever, and that almost everyone has put forth some different theory, and there are many contradictory theories on what the film is about and interpretations of it. So anyway, it was super interesting. I'm glad I watched it, but I'm not sure my sort of impromptu discussion has really said anything about it. But so anyway, I'm not sure how, you know, I might work more on Foucault, but I think I'm gonna end the vlog here, because, you know, if I finish the Foucault, then I can do a little mini review of it first thing tomorrow. If I don't finish today and I finish it tomorrow, then I will just do a mini review tomorrow. But anyway, I hope you have all enjoyed this 5th installment, I believe, of my Sotola-thon. I look forward to your comments as always, and I hope you all have a good evening. Bye, guys.